Hey there, welcome to interpretation. So, as you know by now, there are basically three fields that you can focus on when you do competitive speech and debate. Two of them are in the title, speaking events and debate events. But we're going to do the third kind of event today, and that's interp events. I'm going to cut to an older video where I kind of talk about that. So, I'm going to do that in 3, 2, 1. Let's talk for a second about why we call it interpretation. Why don't we just call it acting? Well, acting is involved, obviously, but what we're really interested in is how you as an actor are an interpretive artist. That means you don't write the material, you interpret the material for the audience. So the way to think of it really is as if the writing that you have to give to us through your performance is a foreign language, and you have to figure out how do you translate it through you. Hey, let's get in the Wayback Machine for a second. You remember in Lincoln Douglas when we talked about the criterion and how it's a lens through which you can evaluate the resolution? Interp's the same thing, except in this case, you are that lens. You're the lens through which we view the story. That's why everybody's interpretation can be a little bit different. That's one of the exciting things about interp, because it's all up to the individual to interpret. We have a few choices. We have prose, poetry, monologue, humorous duet, dramatic duet, sometimes duo, humorous interp, dramatic interp, all the fun stuff. So that was back when I was trying to be an influencer, so if that seemed a little extra, you should see what I cut out of that video. Here's the thing. If you're watching this video, it means one of three things. First, I have assigned you an interp event. Second, you have chosen as your secondary project to do an interp event. Or three, you fell down a crack in the sidewalk of YouTube and you ended up watching my videos. If that's the case, then, welcome. And why don't you go ahead and, like, share, and subscribe. Let's briefly review the interp events. So you have humorous and dramatic interpretation. That's a 10-minute memorized event. Remember, when I say a 10-minute event, I'm talking max time. There's no minimum time on any of these events, but you want to, get close to the max time to do well. So you have humorous and dramatic interpretation. That's one person doing all the characters in the scene. You have basically unlimited movement, except that you can't kneel or get on your knees or anything like that, but you can walk around the room. If you're doing HI or DI, that also means that you may be doing multiple characters. Those characters have placement. We'll discuss that as we move along, but basically what that means is I'm going to place one character here and I'm going to place another character down here, and then I'll pop between them. So it looks something like that, but anyway, that's interp. In dramatic duet and humorous duet, it's similar to that, except that you've got a partner. So now you have two people doing a scene or a series of scenes from a play or a movie or a book. You have two chairs. Those chairs can become anything you suggest they are. So if you need a horse, you straddle the chair, you say yeehaw, and you got a horse. So that's how that works. It's a 10-minute memorized event as well. Then you have prose and poetry. Prose is for freshmen and sophomores. Poetry is for juniors and seniors. It's a memorized event. The max time is 8 minutes. Even though it's memorized, you do hold the script in your hands during it. We'll discuss that later when we get into prose and poetry, but just know that you have that safety net of the script if you need it, although it is a memorized event. You have virtually no movement below the waist. The rule says limited movement, but my rule is let's just not move. No stepping, no bending your knees. You want to focus on your facial expressions, your vocal expressions, and then you do get to gesture in prose and poetry. Finally, you have monologue. Monologue is one person doing two different scripts. It's a 6-minute maximum event. You get a chair, you have unlimited movement, and you do usually a humorous piece and then a dramatic piece. A monologue is one character talking, so you'll only do one character at a time. These are not connected monologues. They may be from the same script, but typically they're from completely different scripts. You think of them as one funny, one serious. So those are the events in a nutshell. Thing that all the interp events have in common is they can't be original. You cannot have written them. And for the most part, they all need to be published by an actual publishing company. There's a little bit of a wiggle room with poetry, but we'll deal with that when we get there. If you have a poem that you really like or a set of poetry that you would really like to do, then let's talk about it, and I'll just make sure that it's legal. It's sort of a gray area, but we need to err on the side of closer to published than unpublished. Finally, all of the performances have to be free of profanity, vulgarity, and nudity. It's in the book. I can't imagine that that's been a problem, but in case you were wondering, in case you thought, you know what this HI really needs, It cannot be profanity, vulgarity, or nudity. Another thing that all of these events have in common is they're all literature. Literature is stuff that you read, and there are basically four kinds of fictional literature, and that's what we're dealing with. There's novel, short story, poetry, and drama. Each of those have their own unique characteristics, but we're going to approach them all the same way for right now. So you may have noticed that I'm wearing a different hoodie, and that's because the other video is going on with the other Interp events in the blue hoodie, but now this is later, and I'm recording new information for poetry because poetry is different than all of the other events. And so we have to sort of diverge a little bit and, choose the path less taken. So that's what we're doing with poetry. The first thing you need to understand is that as a genre, poetry is kind of the coolest form of fictional literature because it's taking the most information, the most meaning, and compressing it into the fewest amount of words. So if I want you to understand a particular experience, say like I'm going to write a novel about traveling and going on a hike and meeting a bear and like barely escaping with my life, I can write that novel and you can get some meaning from it, and I can put in a ton of information, right? And so you read that and you come away with a certain amount of information or a certain amount of meaning that you have made by reading that novel. You can do the same thing with poetry, but you can do it in just a few lines. But it takes a lot more sort of planning and thought in terms of poetry if it's done well and it's good. So there are different rules for poetry. One way of thinking of it is this. Now, first of all, there are all kinds of poems, and some poems are much more like prose than other poems. Some poems tell linear stories just like prose or short stories or novels or films. But I like to think of poetry as the abstract version of the realistic painting that happens in novels or short stories. So if you think of literature in the same way that you think of paintings, you have realistic paintings that look like the thing that they're painting in terms of the physical aspects of that thing. And then you have abstract paintings, and it can be the same subject, but you may be painting it in a way that gets more at the psychology or at the deeper meaning of whatever the subject is of the painting. Let's look at an example to illustrate this. This is The Red Wheelbarrow by William Carlos Williams. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater, beside the white chickens. So what does that mean? You got me. It's kind of like an abstract painting. The truth is, we could go in and analyze it, and we will be doing that with your poems as we go through this process. But the truth is, there's a lot of meaning in there. But on the surface, it looks pretty sort of like, okay, there are just some words arranged on a page, and I get that there are some images I need to think about. There's a red wheelbarrow, it's wet, there are chickens, right? But what's the deeper meaning of that? Well, we could talk about that. We could talk about how the red wheelbarrow is the thing that brings the food to the chickens, so that the chickens depend on the red wheelbarrow. The farmer depends on the chickens. If you look at the way Williams has organized the writing, there's a specific shape to it, and if you look at each of those stanzas, you might suggest that the shape of that stanza is the same shape as a wheelbarrow, which is also the same shape as a chicken. So those are some things to think about. You just pile on that information and then you get some meaning, right? Same thing with your poetry, but it takes a little bit more work on the part of the audience, and that means it takes a little bit more work on the part of the reader, which is you, to get your audience to really understand what's going on in the poem. What does the poet want you to think or feel? It's got a lot to do with images and stuff like that. Another aspect of poetry, and this is key and vital that you understand, and that's that poetry is about the sounds of the language. Certain sounds have different feelings than other sounds. Round sounds are relaxing and calming and nice. But then you have like clipped sounds, right? You have harsher sounds like E vowels are less relaxing than ah vowels or O vowels. And all of that plays into how we interpret poetry. You have hard consonants and soft consonants. There's a difference between a D and a T, right? T is harder than D. So because it's more fricative, you're putting more air through it. Doesn't matter that you know that right now, but just understand that the sounds of the language are important. And so as you work through this project of delivering poetry, you want to think really, how do I use the sounds of the language to enhance the performance and enhance the audience's experience? So, speaking of how important sounds are to poetry, you can think of it as figurative language. So, there are all kinds of examples of figurative language, like metaphor and allusions and things like that. But there are two I want to focus on right now. The first is alliteration, and the second is onomatopoeia. So, alliteration is any time you have repeated consonants in a line. So, you can think of those as like tongue twisters. So, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, right? The P is alliterated. So that's alliteration. And anytime that happens in poetry, you want to bring that out. Even if it's just two words in a line, you want to bring out that alliterated sound. So that's number one. Number two, onomatopoeia are words that sound like the thing they represent. So, like crash, bang, boom. Those are words that are designed to sound like the thing they represent. So, those are two things I want you to focus on: alliteration, onomatopoeia. So, step one, I need you to grab a highlighter or a pen, and I want you to go through your poetry, read it from beginning to end. I don't want you to search for these things. I just want you to go from beginning to end. Circle or highlight any example of alliteration or onomatopoeia. So, do that now. Push pause. Great. Take 5 minutes. Go walk around. Be back by the time your timer goes off. So set a timer for 5 minutes. Go get a drink. Use the bathroom. Step outside. Get some fresh air. Talk to some people if they're on a break as well. Don't talk to people if they're not on a break. Don't get in trouble. 1, 2, 3, go. Hey, welcome back. So this is the same assignment that the other competitors are doing today in Interp. So I'm going to cut back to the blue hoodie. 1, 2, 3, go. So step one of today, I need you to read your script. You have probably already read the script, but you're going to do it one more time. Well, you're going to do it many more times, but this time you're going to do it with a highlighter in your hand or a pen in your hand. And I need you to find all of the words as you read through your script. I need you to find any word that you don't 100% know the definition of. In other words, if I point to the word and you can't say that word means whatever, then you need to highlight or circle that word. I don't want you to skim the script for words you don't know. Don't just skim through it. I need you to read the script from beginning to end with a pen or highlighter in your hand, and just as you come across a word, highlight it or underline it. And that's it. Then move on. Just move on. Right? So you're just going to identify the words that you don't know. Also, if it's a word that you are familiar with, but you're not 100% sure how to pronounce, add that in too. There's nothing more obvious to a judge that a kid hasn't done the work they need to do when they perform, when they mispronounce a word. And the judge is like, that's basic, and points off. Step two, now that you've highlighted the words that you don't know, I need you to go to the Google form that I've assigned to you today. It's just a place where you can type in the word you don't know. Then I need you to Google the word. Then copy and paste the definition over into that form. Make sure you include the pronunciation guide, right? Those are always with the definitions. It's the first part of the definition typically. So you're just going to type the words into the Google form that you don't know and then copy them over. Now here's what you may be thinking. Look, to save time, I'm just going to say I know all of the words. You can do that, but tomorrow I'm going to point to a word that I think you might not know, and if you don't know it, you lose all the points. So get all of the points, just trust the process and do the work. This isn't hard, so do it. Fantastic, take a walk. What I mean by that, as always, is set a timer on your phone or a stopwatch or whatever. Set a timer for 5 minutes and step outside or walk around the room. Or if somebody else is on a 5 minute break, you can talk to them quietly so you're not disturbing anybody else. Go to the bathroom, get a drink. If you want to step outside, step outside. Don't go far. Be back in the room before the timer goes off. But just go away and don't think about speech for 5 minutes. Pause the video. I don't know. That felt like longer than 5 minutes. So here's what I want you to do now. Now that you're back, you're going to read through your script, but I want you to do it in a very specific way. I need you to stand up and read it to a wall. I don't care what wall. You can go to a practice room, you can go outside or to one of our designated rehearsal areas in the school, or you can just walk around your area. You don't need to be loud, but it does need to be verbalized. So you can do it quietly like this, but I still need you to actually say out loud all of the words as you read them. If you're doing a duet, you need to do this with a partner. So all you're doing doing is walking around, standing up, looking at a wall, and reading your script. You're not memorizing, you're not like trying to look up and deliver it, you're just reading the script all the way through from the beginning to end. And remember that you need to trust the process. And what I mean by that really is trust me. If I say I need you to stand up and read the script out loud, trust me that I need you to stand up and read the script out loud so that you benefit from all of the things you'll benefit. I'm not, just trust me. Just trust me. Do it. And if you do it, by the end of the 15 days, you'll have a piece ready to go for contest. Pause the video. Make sure you do the Google form, and then you're done for the day.